Brexit was the withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the European Union, but the word itself can make the story sound simpler than it was. It was not just one vote, one law, or one dramatic night. It was the result of decades of tension over sovereignty, trade, migration, identity, and Britain's place in Europe. The UK officially left the EU at 11 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on January 31, 2020, ending a membership that had begun in 1973. Yet even that moment did not instantly settle everything. Brexit changed legal relationships, political parties, trade rules, and the constitutional balance inside the UK. To understand Brexit, start with what the European Union represented. The UK joined the European Communities, the EU's predecessor, on January 1, 1973. The project had grown out of post-war European cooperation, using shared institutions and common rules to bind economies together. Over time, this cooperation deepened into a more integrated political and legal system. EU law could take priority over national law in areas covered by European treaties, and the Court of Justice of the European Union helped interpret those rules. For supporters, this brought influence, stability, and access to a large single market. For critics, it meant decisions affecting Britain were increasingly shaped outside Westminster. British doubts about Europe were not new. Eurosceptic groups existed throughout the UK's membership, objecting either to the whole project or to parts of it. In 1975, just 2 years after joining, the UK held a referendum on whether to remain in the European Communities. The result was decisive: 67.2% voted to stay. But the argument did not disappear. As European integration developed and phrases like ever closer union became politically sensitive, some British politicians and voters worried that membership was moving beyond economic cooperation and toward a loss of national control. These concerns remained a minority position for many years, but they never went away. By the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, opposition to further European integration became especially important inside parts of the Conservative Party. Some MPs believed EU membership limited Parliament's sovereignty and made it harder for Britain to set its own rules. Others were less opposed to cooperation but disliked the direction of integration. Outside Parliament, the UK Independence Party, or UKIP, turned Euroscepticism into a clearer electoral force. UKIP's rise put pressure on the Conservatives, especially by attracting voters who felt mainstream parties were ignoring concerns about immigration, borders, regulation, and national identity. Europe was no longer just a policy dispute, it had become a major political fault line. David Cameron, the Conservative Prime Minister, tried to manage this pressure with a promise. If the Conservatives won the 2015 general election, he would hold a referendum on Britain's EU membership. Many expected another coalition or a more complicated result, but the Conservatives won a small and unexpected majority. That made the referendum promise unavoidable. Cameron supported remaining in the EU and hoped a public vote would settle the issue for a generation. Instead, the referendum opened a national debate that cut across party lines, regions, age groups, and social identities. The question placed on the ballot was direct: should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave? The 2016 campaign divided British politics in unusual ways. The Remain side included Cameron, future Prime Ministers Theresa May, Liz Truss, and Keir Starmer, as well as former Prime Ministers John Major, Tony Blair, and Gordon Brown. Remain argued that EU membership supported trade, jobs, investment, and international influence. The Leave campaign included figures such as Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, who would also later become prime ministers. Leave argued that Britain should regain control over laws, borders, money, and trade policy. Both campaigns spoke to real concerns, but they emphasized different risks. Remain warned of economic disruption, while Leave warned of democratic and national decline inside the EU. On June 23, 2016, the UK voted. The result was close but clear enough to transform the country. 51.9% voted to leave, while 48.1% voted to remain. The geography of the result mattered. England and Wales voted mostly for Brexit, except for Greater London, which supported remaining. Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Gibraltar voted to remain. This meant Brexit was not only a UK versus EU issue, it also exposed deep internal divisions within the United Kingdom. Different nations and regions had different economic ties, political traditions, and views of European identity. The morning after the vote, the UK faced a constitutional and diplomatic challenge unlike anything in modern British politics. The political consequences came immediately. David Cameron, who had campaigned for Remain, announced he would resign. Theresa May became Prime Minister and inherited the task of turning a referendum result into a legal and practical departure. That was far more complicated than simply announcing that Britain was leaving. The EU was woven into the UK's trade, immigration systems, regulations, courts, agriculture, fisheries, security cooperation, and rights frameworks. The government had to decide what kind of Brexit it wanted, a close economic relationship with many shared rules, or a cleaner break that restored more national autonomy but created more barriers with Europe. The central challenge was negotiation. The UK had to agree withdrawal terms with the EU, including money, citizens' rights, transition arrangements, and the highly sensitive issue of the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. This border mattered because the Republic of Ireland remained in the EU, while Northern Ireland was leaving as part of the UK. A hard border risked disrupting trade and undermining political stability linked to the peace process. At the same time, keeping the border open raised questions about customs checks, regulatory alignment, and whether Northern Ireland would follow some EU rules differently from the rest of the UK. Theresa May's government struggled to get a withdrawal agreement through Parliament. Her proposal was overwhelmingly rejected, reflecting how divided MPs were over what Brexit should mean. Some believed her deal kept the UK too closely tied to the EU. Others feared it created economic damage or weakened the union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The uncertainty led to delays in the withdrawal date, partly to avoid a no-deal Brexit, where the UK would leave without an agreement to manage the immediate consequences. British politics became consumed by Brexit, leading to snap general elections in 2017 and 2019 and repeated parliamentary deadlock. The deadlock shifted after Boris Johnson became Prime Minister and the Conservatives won the 2019 general election with a strong majority. Johnson campaigned on the promise to get Brexit done, meaning pass the withdrawal agreement and complete the formal exit. Parliament then approved a deal, and the UK officially left the European Union on January 31, 2020. But the practical relationship did not change overnight. An 11-month transition period began, during which the UK continued to participate in major EU arrangements, including the Single Market and Customs Union. This gave both sides time to negotiate the future relationship, especially on trade. After Brexit, EU law and the Court of Justice of the European Union no longer had general primacy over British law. However, the change was managed carefully to avoid an immediate legal vacuum. The European Union Withdrawal Act 2018 retained much existing EU law as domestic UK law, allowing Britain to amend or repeal it later. In other words, Brexit did not automatically erase decades of rules from the statute book. Instead, many rules were copied into UK law first, then made subject to British political control. The UK also remained bound by international obligations and treaties, including agreements with EU member states and the EU itself. The transition period ended with the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, signed on December 30, 2020 and provisionally applied from January 1, 2021 before formally entering into force on May 1. This agreement shaped much of the post-Brexit relationship, especially trade, cooperation, and rules for future interaction. It reduced some disruption but did not recreate EU membership. The UK was outside the Single Market and Customs Union, meaning new checks, paperwork, and regulatory differences could emerge. Brexit therefore marked both an ending and a beginning, the end of formal EU membership and the start of a new, still evolving relationship between Britain, Europe, and the different nations inside the UK. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.